parents threw my birthday gift in the trash and texted, "You're a disgrace." I laughed and replied, "Thanks." That night they showed up crying when they realized. You want to know when I finally stopped trying? It wasn't the day my mother called me a failure to my face. It wasn't the day my father asked me, half joking, of course, if I was gay just because I didn't take the corporate route like my brother. And it wasn't even the dozen birthdays they forgot while they were too busy celebrating Brian's latest accomplishment, like opening a new startup or buying his second home in Aspen. No. The moment I stopped trying was my last birthday. That was the day I mailed them everything. It started like it always did. An empty inbox. No call, no text, not even a "Hope you're doing okay." I was used to it. I'd spent most of my adult life in the shadows of my parents' love for my brother Brian, the golden child, the real man, the one who took over Dad's business and made it shinier, flashier, even more soul-sucking. I was the creative disappointment. The kid who left law school after a year to chase music, film, whatever phase they thought I was in. The irony? I was actually doing pretty well. Scratch that, better than well. I had built a media company from the ground up. Quietly. I worked under a pseudonym. No one in my family knew. The documentaries I produced won awards. I had clients who paid me more for a week of consultation than my dad made in a month. But to them, I was still the joke. And I was tired. Tired of being the joke. So this year, I decided to send them one final gift, a peace offering, if you want to call it that. A letter, written by hand, something personal, vulnerable, filled with stories from my childhood they'd probably forgotten. I wrote about my first piano recital, when they left halfway through to catch Brian's soccer game. I wrote about the night I stayed up tending to Mom's migraines while Brian went out partying. I told them I forgave them. And I meant it. I also sent a small wooden box with a silver emblem etched into the lid. Inside was a pair of cufflinks, antique, elegant, the kind of thing Dad used to admire in catalogs but never buy. I had them custom engraved with a simple date, the upcoming Friday. No explanation. Just the date and a time. 7 p.m. Tucked under the letter was a card. Black, minimalist, and embossed with gold foil. It read, "You are cordially invited. Formal attire required." The answer to everything you think you know, revealed. They never opened it. I know this because 2 days later, I got a photo. A blurry shot of my letter and gift in the trash. The caption? "You're a disgrace." No greeting. No name. Just those words. Probably from my mother. She had a way of twisting the knife while smiling. But this time, I didn't break. I didn't cry or rage or drink myself into a corner. I laughed. A deep, guttural laugh, the kind that surprises you with how much relief it brings. Then I typed back one word. "Thanks." And hit send. They had no idea what was coming. The event was already set in motion by then. I had booked the venue months ago, an old library turned gallery space in the heart of the city, the kind of place that made even the most jaded art critics whisper. It was elegant without being gaudy, intimate yet grand, and bathed in a soft, golden light that made every detail look deliberate. The event wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about legacy. Closure. A little poetic punctuation to the sentence I had been trying to finish for most of my life. The date on the cufflinks? That was the opening night of my foundation, the Elena Project, named after the only person who ever believed in me, my grandmother. The one who slipped me $20 bills after family dinners, whispering, "Don't let anyone dim your light." She passed away when I was 23, long before any of my success ever touched the surface. But I carried her with me in every pitch, every film, every sleepless night I spent building what they all dismissed as a hobby. The project's goal was simple: to fund scholarships for young creatives from families who didn't believe in them. I didn't invite my parents directly. That would have been begging. But I made sure the letter and the card hinted just enough, the same way they'd always danced around affection with passive-aggressive jabs and veiled criticism. Except this time, I was using subtlety as a blade. And of course, they ignored it. The media didn't. The event was covered by 3 major news outlets, streamed online, and attended by people whose names they'd recognize immediately: Brian's old business rivals, a few local politicians, even a celebrity or two. But what really lit the match was the final reveal, a short film I directed myself. Not about the foundation, or about success. It was about invisible children. Kids who grow up in the shadows of golden siblings. Kids who are mocked for being soft, sensitive, or different. Kids whose best wasn't good enough, and who survived anyway. When the lights came up after the screening, the room was silent. People clapped, sure. Some even stood. But I remember the silence more. The kind that says, we didn't know. We see you now. Later that night, as the event wound down and guests slipped out into the cool spring air, I stepped into the back hallway just for a breath of solitude. That's when I heard the click of heels on marble and the soft creak of the front doors swinging open. They were late. Of course they were. And they didn't come alone. My mother, in pearls and panic. My father, red-eyed and unusually quiet. And behind them, Brian. Not smug for once, but shaken. They had seen the headlines. Someone had sent them the live stream. Probably one of Dad's old friends trying to stir the pot. My mother was crying, mascara streaked and clinging to my arm like we hadn't spoken in years. We didn't know, she sobbed. Why didn't you tell us? I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then slowly met her eyes. I did, I said. You threw it in the trash. My father looked away. And Brian? He tried to crack a joke. Something hollow and awkward, about how he always knew I had something in me. I didn't laugh. Instead, I nodded slowly. You're right. I do. And then I took a step back. Calm. Composed. Now if you'll excuse me, I said, gesturing to the velvet ropes still strung across the entrance. This event is for those who believed in me. My mother's mouth fell open, like she couldn't believe I'd deny her. My father looked like he wanted to protest, but the weight of the moment pinned him down. I held the door open. And one by one they walked out. I closed it behind them with a soft, final click. You'd think I felt triumphant in that moment, the soft thud of the door clicking shut behind them, the cold spring air cutting them off from the warmth they never helped build. But what I really felt was silence. Not just around me, but inside me. The kind of silence you don't notice until it replaces something else. For me, it was the hum of needing to be seen. The weight I'd carried since childhood, of proving, performing, hoping, suddenly evaporated. And in its place, stillness. I stood alone in the hallway for a long while. The last few guests were filtering out, offering kind smiles and handshakes. Some of them had tears in their eyes from the film. A few gave me cards, saying they wanted to donate or help. But I'd barely remember their names now. What I remember is the warmth in my chest when an old man I didn't recognize, a retired art teacher, apparently, stopped at the doorway, turned to me and said, "That film. I wish someone had told me that story when I was 12. I wouldn't have wasted so much time trying to be someone else." I nodded quietly. There wasn't anything to say. After everyone had gone, I returned to the gallery space. The lights were dim now, just a few spotlights casting golden halos over the displays. On the far wall hung a blown-up still from the film, a child's silhouette walking alone down a hallway, dragging a backpack that looked too heavy for their frame. That shot was me. From an old home video. I'd slowed it down, turned the contrast up, made the hallway seem endless. Because that's how it felt. I stood in front of it for a long time, hands in my pockets, letting the weight of everything sink in, not just the success, or the irony, but the cost. There's something bittersweet about getting what you always wanted when you no longer need it. Their approval? That longing had been replaced. Not by pride or arrogance, but by something sturdier. Peace. The next morning, I woke up to a text. It was from Brian. "Look. I'm sorry. I didn't know how much you were carrying. I think Mom and Dad are shaken. I know you don't owe us anything, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at it for a long time. He meant well. Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted to not be on the losing side for once. But I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, I wasn't. It's just that I'd finally arrived at a place where their words didn't define me anymore. Let them be sorry. Let them cry. Let them come to terms with the life they missed out on, the son they ignored, the legacy they tried to erase because it didn't fit their mold. I'd already mourned the version of them I needed when I was young. This was just the final chapter. I closed my phone, poured myself a quiet cup of coffee, and looked out at the city. The view was different now. In the weeks that followed, I expected some kind of retaliation. That was their pattern, after all. A cold war of silence followed by guilt-laced messages, perhaps a carefully curated Facebook post painting themselves as the victims of a wayward son. But nothing came. That was the new pattern. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind I'd begged for as a child just to hear myself think, but the kind that comes when people finally realize they don't hold power over you anymore. When they know that whatever words they sling won't land, because you're not standing in the same room anymore. They'd always been the storytellers in our family. Twisting narratives, rewriting history to suit their image. Brian was the visionary, even though most of his ideas were bought or borrowed. I was difficult, sensitive, unpredictable. That's how they explained me away to relatives, friends, even themselves. But this time, I controlled the narrative. Publicly. Permanently. The film made its rounds, not just in art circles, but in classrooms, nonprofits, even a mental health advocacy group that asked to feature it in a national campaign. The foundation took off faster than I imagined. Donations poured in. Kids from broken homes, marginalized voices, underfunded dreams, they started writing letters. Thanking me. Telling me they saw themselves on screen for the first time. Some of them asked if I'd ever made peace with my family. I didn't know how to answer that. Because the truth is, I didn't make peace with them. I made peace with the absence of them. And somehow, that was enough. Brian tried a few more times. A voicemail around week 3, sounding tired, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Then a message through an old mutual friend. They're not doing well. Mom's been crying a lot. Dad barely talks. I think they feel like they lost you. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood something they never taught me. You don't owe people a seat at your table just because they helped build the house. Especially if they kept trying to set the place on fire. So I went back to work. Quietly. Steadily. Built out the next phase of the foundation. Started writing again. Composing music again. And one morning, as I walked into my studio with the sun cutting through the windows just right, I saw the cufflinks on my desk, the ones they never touched. Still nestled in their velvet box, glinting like some unopened truth. I almost gave them away. Almost. But instead I took them out, clipped them onto the cuffs of a crisp white shirt, and wore them to a university panel that afternoon. A student came up to me afterward, nervous, starry-eyed. She said, "Your film changed the way I see my family. I don't think I'm broken anymore. Just different." I smiled. Different is where all the good stories begin. It happened quietly. One afternoon, I got an email from a real estate agent. The name was familiar, someone my parents had worked with in the past. The subject line simply read, "They're selling the house." I didn't need to ask which one. The old family home, the stage for years of tension, the backdrop to birthday dinners where I sat quietly while Brian's every move was applauded like a royal announcement. I hadn't set foot in that house in almost a decade. Now it was on the market. No note. No explanation. Just the cold professionalism of a listing, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. Full of potential. I stared at the email for a long time. They were letting go. Or maybe they were just trying to escape it. The memories, the silence, the guilt that must have pooled in the walls after I walked out and never looked back. I didn't reply. Didn't call the agent. But a week later I drove by. Just once. No parking. No slowing down. I passed the house the way you pass a grave, respectfully distant, with a small nod to the past, and no desire to go digging. I didn't feel sad. Or angry. Just free. They could sell the house. But I'd already moved out of that story a long time ago. It was an email. Not a call, not a letter. Just a plain, 3-sentence message from my mother, sent at 2:17 a.m., as if shame had roused her out of sleep. We watched the film again. I think we finally understand. We're sorry. No punctuation after. Sorry. No explanation. No attempt to justify what came before. Just 3 sentences. Late. Small. Years too late. And yet, for a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Not anger, not triumph. Just that familiar ache of almost. They didn't name what they were sorry for. Not the birthdays forgotten, the dreams mocked, the words that left bruises no one could see. But maybe that was the best they could do. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. But because sometimes silence is the clearest boundary you can draw. I let the message sit there, unread again after that first glance. A digital ghost of accountability. They had finally seen the version of me they'd refused to believe existed. And now, they were the ones left in the quiet. 2 months later, I hosted a private dinner. Not a gala, not a red carpet event, just 20 people gathered under string lights on the rooftop of a downtown building I'd renovated into a creative studio. The guest list was hand-picked, young artists, quiet visionaries, the kids who were once told they'd never make it. The ones who reminded me of me. We served handmade pasta, poured wine from small family vineyards, and played soft jazz as the sun dipped behind the skyline. Somewhere between the second course and the toasts, someone clinked a glass and said, "To you! For proving them all wrong." I didn't stand. Didn't wave it off modestly. I just smiled, raised my glass, and said, "To all of us. For proving we were right to believe in ourselves." Later that night, I checked my phone. A voicemail from my father. His voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Your mother told me you're doing something tonight. Something important. I wish we were there." I sat with that for a long time. Wish. Funny word. Full of things that never happened. They weren't there. And that, finally, felt right. It was a Thursday, late spring, soft air, the kind that makes the city feel less like concrete and more like a pulse. I was walking home from the studio after a long day editing a new project, something raw, personal, about grief and quiet survival. Something I wouldn't have dared touch 5 years ago. As I turned onto my block, I passed a bookstore. Small, tucked between a wine bar and a florist. In the window, a handwritten sign read, "Book Talk Tonight, the ones we leave behind." I stopped. That was the title of a memoir I had consulted on, just a few notes in the margins, really. The author had reached out after watching my film. She'd said, "You gave me permission to tell the truth." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I was used to people thanking me and then disappearing into their own stories. But tonight she was here. Sharing hers. So I stepped inside. The room was warm, tight with people. Folding chairs and overgrown ferns and the smell of old paper. She stood at the front, small, steady voice, reading a passage about growing up as the afterthought in her family. Every line felt like a thread sewn straight through my own memories. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes the ones we love most are the ones we have to let go of, not out of hate, but because they refuse to see who we became when they weren't looking." I felt something in me shift. Not crack. Not break. Just move. Like a door that had always been locked, finally swinging open to a room I'd stopped trying to enter. For years, I told myself I didn't need their love. I'd built entire worlds without it. But I had still carried the weight of what I'd never received, like an empty gift box I couldn't stop checking. But now I could leave it behind. Not as a punishment to them. Not as a dramatic flourish. But as an offering to myself. They would never be the parents I needed. But I became the person I needed, on my own. When the reading ended, I stayed behind to talk to the author. She hugged me. Not tightly. Just enough. "Thank you," she said, "for giving people like me a map." I nodded, heart full. I left the bookstore that night feeling light. Not empty. Not angry. Just free. A week later, I was cleaning out my closet, the one in my guest room where I kept all the forgotten things, old journals, camera gear, dusty cables I hadn't used in years. Tucked in the back, wedged between two composition notebooks, was a photo frame I didn't remember saving. It was a picture from my high school graduation. I was standing off to the side of the frame, half smiling, clutching my diploma. My parents were in the center, arms around Brian, who looked like he just won the Nobel Prize. I remembered the moment, how they insisted on retaking the photo twice because I wasn't standing straight, or didn't look grateful enough. I pulled the frame out and sat on the floor, just staring. Back then I had wished for nothing more than to be in the center of that photo. To be seen. To be the one they bragged about. But looking at it now, all I saw was how much smaller I looked next to them, not physically, but emotionally. Like I had made myself shrink to fit into a space that was never meant for me. So I stood up, removed the photo from the frame, and replaced it with a new one, a recent picture of the rooftop dinner. Me, surrounded by artists, dreamers, people who knew me without knowing the version my family had tried to create. People who chose me. And I placed it on my desk. Where it belonged. The last time they came to my building, it was unannounced. Middle of the day. I heard the buzzer ring 3 times in quick succession, the way my father used to when I was a kid, like knocking on the world. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. First from my mother. We're downstairs. Please. Just 5 minutes. Then from Brian. They're not doing well. You don't have to forgive them, just listen. I stood by the window, watching them on the sidewalk. My mother holding a small box. My father staring up at my window. Brian off to the side, arms crossed, like he was the mediator of a negotiation already lost. I didn't go down. Not out of bitterness. Not out of pride. But because I had already written my ending, and it didn't include their version of reconciliation. Not the kind that only shows up when the cameras start rolling and the world takes notice. Not when the cost has already been paid by someone else. So I turned from the window, let the buzzer fade into silence, and got back to work. Sometimes, the most powerful answer you can give to those who doubted you is no answer at all.